Shrey, thanks so much for your time. So the theme on today's show is speaking to new bosses. We just spoke to the acting new boss there at SARS, but you're not acting at all. You are here to stay for a while. So as the new man there at Life Healthcare, I mean, what are your plans for the hospital group?
Good day, Rafira, and thanks for having me on the show.
It's Fifi, by the way.
We'll go with Fifi. Sorry about that.
No problem.
It's early days to commit to a new strategy per se, but I think with our first look into the business as a senior management team, we're quite excited about what we're going to be building on in terms of the foundations that we have, but also looking into the future on a set of new aspects. And I think if I talk to that in a little bit more detail, as you mentioned, we've shared under cautionary that we're in discussions with Max Healthcare about exiting India. While we're quite excited about India as a continent, I think right now, or rather as a country, right now our focus is much more around deepening in the current investments that we have, both in South Africa as we build on a hospital group, as you referred to us in the introduction, into becoming a healthcare provider. And then similarly, our recent investments in predominantly in Western Europe through Alliance Medical Group, where we've bought a pretty compelling imaging set of assets across a broad set of Western European countries. We're looking to then become quite prominent in diagnostics, and I think the combination of the two, as we think about focusing on our traditional core as a hospital provider, but at the same time expanding into complementary services, I think will really play to our strengths, which has always been about quality care, about being a really efficient operator and being quite prudent with our capital. So hopefully that story is compelling.
I mean, Shrey, had things not been so difficult in India, because I mean the previous set of results, it reflected that difficulty with the demonetization program and the economy going through its other challenges. I mean, would we be having discussions around an exit?
Absolutely. And as I said, if I take a long-term view on India, I still think, or we still as a group think that is a market that shows good growth. I really think it comes down to investment horizons and strategy, which is why whoever buys it from us, be it Max or potentially somebody else, it would better align with their strategy. I think right now, if you look at it, there are some regulatory headwinds coming, and that's a very short-term thing. I think there's the view that we would have is that the next 12 months or 12 to 18 months, as it leads up into an election cycle, particularly in the region that we operate with our partners in Max Healthcare, has in New Delhi an environment that should see some regulatory changes, none of which aren't anticipated or have been designed for by that management team. It's a strong management team. They've had some challenges in the short term, but if you take a long-term view on it, it's still a compelling business.
Okay, so you're going head on deep into Europe and looking to further, acquire new businesses, possibly brownfield operations, as I do understand. So for a South African who's looking, or and a layman investor who's looking at this and saying, oh, okay, no, Life Healthcare is looking to strengthen its arm there in Europe. But then afterwards, you've got a Netcare who's saying that no, we are throwing in the towel in that region. I mean, what's different for you that Netcare didn't necessarily enjoy in that market?
Let me focus on what our intention is.
Though, just operationally.
I'm very comfortable with that. I think the first differentiation is that we aren't looking to buy acute hospitals offshore or in Europe right now. Our investment strategy and thesis behind it has really been about broadening or building out businesses that are complementary to hospitals, hence the focus on imaging and diagnostics more broadly than just imaging. So if you look at the investment that we made just under 2 years ago in Alliance Medical Group, which is arguably the largest and one of the most successful imaging businesses in Western Europe, not just the UK, Italy, Ireland, Spain, Norway, and a few other countries. What it does is it positions us well from a growth point of view, while there could be an easy discourse about the pressures that are being felt in acute hospitals. So I think the nature of those stories are quite different, and the investment focus is quite different. With aging populations, high incidence and diagnosis of cancer or the broader oncology space, mental health and neurological diseases, and other geriatric conditions, the growth that will come, be it whether it is in acute hospitals or outside of acute, which is what I think a large part of the global trend is, would naturally result in diagnostics and these other aspects becoming more critical. So from a growth strategy point of view, we're quite excited about the opportunity. I never want to make it sound easy, and I think the challenges in any market, be it our home territory of South Africa or these international markets, will always be immense. But I think, to the earlier point of us being strong operators, understanding how to provide quality care, I do believe it plays to our strengths. And I think from prudent use of capital to what you alluded to, brownfield investments or going deeper with relevant, let me use the word, relevant and very strategic investments in the territories we're in now will probably be more of the short to medium term focus than new geographies.
All right. And then, Shrey, just as we wrap, I mean, life, obviously no stranger to South Africans because of the unfortunate tragedy that was Life Esidimeni. I mean, operationally, how are you seeing the South African healthcare space, your position in it, and the kind of opportunities that you hope to exploit to ultimately increase values for shareholders?
First, I'd love to just say something about Life Esidimeni. As you reference it, it's an absolute tragedy. And I don't want to take away from that conversation by talking about the operations and what we plan to do with the business. I think in that regard, there aren't any words that can justify what's happened. I think the removal of patients from the Life Esidimeni facilities has resulted in an absolute unfortunate loss of life. And I think collectively, all of us in the space have to show a commitment to ensuring those kind of things don't happen again. I think that's not even, at least for us, a discussion. It's an absolute commitment to say how can we help and support and ensure things like that removal from patients from facilities like ours where quality of care or their well-being or livelihood is ever compromised again, that whatever we can do to further enforce that it doesn't happen again is critical. With regards to the operations and the business in South Africa, separate to that tragedy, 2016, 2017 was a tough operating year. I fully acknowledge that. I think already our numbers from what we've shared in the pre-close has shown that to some extent the business is stabilized and starting to show good growth. I think we're hoping to get 8 to 10% growth in our top line. We've shared some of the numbers around how the PPDs are doing better than, so the paid patient days are doing better than anticipated with a 1.5 to 2.2% versus what we previously stated as 1. Again, modest, but I think very compelling in an environment that is the South African market. And I think in that sense, we will build on that and commit to, as always, high quality care, being a good operator. That hopefully translates into unlocking more shareholder value. I think if you look at the share price in the last 6 months and in the last quarter, it's started to show a trajectory that's much more positive. It's between 15% on the 6 months, which is good. And I think the intentions we have, let me leave it at that, the intentions we have over the next 12 to 18 months should build out quite strongly, and that should be a good story if I'm invited back to share with you.
Yeah, of course. So you'll be invited back when you release your results. But Shrey, formal part of the interview is over. Just parting question. I mean, as a fellow South African who is, very much aware of what's happening right now, the mourning and the death of Winnie Madikizela Mandela. I mean, any comments on what she was to you?
Deeply inspiring amongst a broader set of leaders, and it's always death's such an expected thing as people get older. You never want to make it sound like you expect it or it's easy, but when it's people that are as iconic as that, I can't understand how any South African wouldn't be cut deep by a loss like that. Today is not an easy day for any of us.